Welcome to another episode of Social Cohesion in Action. I'm Ethan Hall, the Project Officer within the Department of Social Cohesion, Culture, Youth and Sport of Ministry of the Presidency. Our previous episodes, we had discussions that I know that you would have enjoyed and you would have learned something from those discussions. I learned something, and I can tell you I've been trying to put some of those things that we discussed to help me to get through this period of COVID-19. On today's episode, our discussion will look at dealing with stress and anxiety. With us today is Mr. Will Campbell, psychologist, trainer, and a lecturer at the University of Guyana, and Mr. Mahendra Budram, our technical officer within the Department of Social Cohesion, Culture, Youth and Sport. Here is Mr. Will Campbell and Mahendra Budram to take you into this discussion.
Thank you once again for joining us as we continue to explore social cohesion in action. This segment is the fourth installment in this very interesting series, and we will be examining how to deal with stress and anxiety associated with social distancing, especially in this time of COVID-19. With us, we have Mr. Will Campbell, who is a psychologist and is also a lecturer at the University of Guyana. He is also the coordinator of Youth and Community Development Studies at the university. I am Mahendra Budram, your host for this program. So, as we're going into stress and anxiety, we hear people mention that he or she is bear stress, or don't stress me out, this good morning, it's good morning, don't stress me out. What exactly is stress, really?
Very often we misuse the word stress. Stress is really a physiological response, or our body's way of responding to a demand, all right? Particularly to a changing demand. So, for example, if I'm accustomed to having money, and now my funds have been shortened, my income has been reduced for whatever reason, there is a demand. I have to now cut back on spending. I have to make this less money continue to sustain me. And so that is stressful. My body is going to respond in a certain way. But there are other things that can cause stresses as well. But essentially, it's our body's response to a changing demand. Now, what happens when you are under stress is your brains signal your body that it's going to need some more energy. It's going to need some more focus. And so your heart rate increases, your breathing becomes, your breathing rate increases, your blood pressure goes up. All of these things happen because at least two hormones, cortisol and adrenaline, are now released into your bloodstream, signaling to your body that we're going to have to do something here. You're going to have to prepare for action. And so those internal activities that are going on could be manifested in other ways. Our muscles become tense, or we might begin to sweat some more. Some people start to tremble. You know, some of the effects are visible. Now, if that stress is chronic, if we are under stress for an extended period of time, it could affect us behaviorally as well.
Okay.
So that when people are stressed out, for example, they become more irritable, they're on a short fuse. Some people become more withdrawn, some people talk more, some people talk less, some people eat more when they're stressed, and some people lose their appetite when they're stressed. Some people lose sleep when they're stressed. Some people have a difficulty waking up when they're stressed. So our bodies respond a little differently, but it is the same thing that is going on inside. Our brain says, here is something that you need to respond to. You're going to need to go into overdrive. And so our bodies have what we call a stress response.
Okay, so we're talking about the different circumstances that can lead to you developing this sort of response to stress. But is stress really bad, that bad? Or how can you?
That's a really great question. Stress in itself can be bad, it can be good, and researchers have divided good stress and bad stress. They've given them names. So good stress is referred to as distress.
Distress, okay.
Sorry, bad stress is
Bad
distress.
stress, okay.
And good stress is considered eustress. So good stress is motivating, while bad stress is destructive. Now, bad stress could come as a result of financial difficulty or loss of a loved one, or these negative things that cause us to stress out. But then there is also good stress. For example, if I have an upcoming examination, then there is something inside of me that says, you've got to do something to prepare for this exam. So that stress can motivate me to study harder, to do some more reading, to prepare myself. If I'm about to run a race, there is this, the adrenaline comes.
Yes.
That is a stress response that says to me, you have to push yourself to win this race. So stress can be motivating, and in that case, it is good stress. Now, the factors, the triggers, the things that can trigger stress responses can be good things or bad things. So stress doesn't only come when something negative happens, or I have to deal with a negative change or a negative demand. For example, if I get a promotion, that's a good thing. You will agree with me. A promotion is a good thing.
Yes.
It means more status, or more importantly,
more salary,
between me and you, more money, right?
Exactly.
It's more money. But that could trigger a stress response, because now I'm thinking, my brain is thinking a different position, increased demands, more responsibility. Will I be able to perform? All of those things. And so that can also trigger a stress response. So we don't always get stressed as a result of negative things. It could also be a result of positive things. Moving into a new house, moving into your own home, good thing, but it brings stress as well. So, we get the same response, but to different situations, right? But anything that requires, that demands some kind of action on our part, triggers a stress response.
Okay. But you were talking about negative and positive environment. Right now, we can view COVID-19, this social distancing, as negative. But in response to a negative situation, how can we let that stress be good stress instead of distress or bad stress?
In a previous discussion I had, someone was talking about the fact that, a lot of us have reduced income as a result of COVID-19. But what it has done for a lot of people is caused them to become creative. So the stress of not having sufficient funds have caused them to explore other talents that they have had. So you have a positive response to a stressful situation. Many of us don't like to be told that we have to be confined to our homes all the time. And so for a lot of us, that is stressful. But we can use that time to do things around the home that we weren't able to do before. And so we're able to get a positive result out of a stressful situation. So, and then when we take that approach, then it becomes eustress instead of distress. It becomes a motivating stress rather than a destructive stress. So let me use myself as an example. I love gardening, but before COVID-19, I would leave home, before it gets light outside, and I'd get home when it's dark. So I did not have time to do gardening. Now, I don't like the fact that I have work that is piling up because I can't leave home as much as I want to, and their some offices are not open, and so on. I don't like that. That is stressful for me.
Yeah.
But I have chosen to use some of that extra time that I now have at home to revive my garden.
Okay.
And so that's a positive. In fact, that has brought some relaxation to me. I'm hoping that post-COVID, I'm able to sustain that garden, because, you don't want me to start talking about gardening right now. I'm going to take over the discussion.
Okay.
But it has brought a lot of stress relief, and maybe we can talk about stress relief a little later on. So even in difficult situations, you could choose a response that brings a positive result even though the trigger
Is negative.
is a negative one.
Okay. Well, let's go straight into that. How do we cope with stress?
All right. I consider myself, I'm a cognitive behavioral therapist. I believe in this school of thought that everything starts with how we think. Everything starts in your brain. Everything starts with a thought. So, for example, if I'm to leave this room, a thought enters my head. It's time for me to leave this room. And then I respond. And our feelings have a lot to do with how we think. So I'm getting to your response just now. Our feelings have, are contingent on how we choose to view a certain situation, how we choose to see a certain situation. So I believe that foundational to coping with stressful situations is learning to see the cup as half full rather than half empty.
Okay.
We're in COVID-19, we're in lockdown, reduced income, have to stay home, all of these challenges, fear of getting sick, and so on. Those are negative things. I can choose to look at that. I can't go out, I ain't making money. What I'm doing there is I'm kind of piling on the stress on my brain. Or I can choose to say, well, now that I'm home, there's that pipe that my wife wanted me to fix.
Yeah, about 10 years ago or something.
I'm touching a current here. There is this thing in the house that my wife wanted me to fix so long ago.
Yeah.
Here is an opportunity. I don't have to leave home early. I can fix this now. I had promised my children to play this game with them, or to take them down in the backyard for a walk or to show them something. Here is an opportunity for me to now spend some more time with my children. Now notice that my thought pattern is a little different. I'm focusing on the opportunities
Yes.
rather than the challenges. Once I focus on those opportunities, then I am giving a positive vibe, so to speak, to my brain. And the stress response is reduced. I don't have that adrenaline pumping through my brain. My heart rate doesn't go up. My blood pressure doesn't go up. I'm not breathing shallow and rapidly anymore because now I am choosing to look at this in a positive light. And, those things that I mentioned are positive things. When you finish fixing something around the house, I don't know if you're a handyman, but when you when you
try a
finish
few
fixing
things.
something around the house, I don't know about you, but I step back and admire it. Sometimes I take a picture. I call my wife to look at it, and there's a feeling of satisfaction that is
Yes.
derived from being able to complete a task that you would not otherwise have been able to complete. So instead of a stress response now, you get a positive emotion coming out of it.
Okay.
So, and all of that started because you chose to see the opportunity rather than the challenge. So it starts with how we think. So that's one way of dealing with stress. There are several other ways, and an important part of dealing with stress is to arm yourself with knowledge, with information. Arm yourself with information, but you have to be cautious about that. Let's use our current circumstances again. In this age of COVID-19, we have, I'm calling it an age, we have a lot of information coming in. So many people dying, so many people getting sick, and when this happens, it destroys your organs, and they're finding that it is creating other issues, and it is shutting down people's kidneys, and it's not just your respiratory system. If I spend all day watching television, CNN or whomever, talk about COVID-19, I will become depressed. So what I need to do is to ration how much information. In fact, I think that by now, we don't need to be paying attention to that anymore. We don't need to keep tabs on the body count and how many people are dying around the world. That's not necessary. We already know what we need to do. Sanitize, wear a mask when you're going out, wash your hands carefully, eat well, stock up on your vitamins, boost your immune system. And as long as I'm doing that, then I can ease some of my stress because now I am doing something about the issue. And when you're fixing the problem, when you're doing something to fix, you're actively engaged in fixing a problem, it reduces the sense of stress. So that is another thing that we can do. Arm yourself with good information, but good, and not negative information, not stressful information. In the age of social distancing or physical distancing, we need to maintain positive social connections. That's another way of dealing with stress. Having positive people around you. Now, this doesn't just mean a whole lot of friends. It means people who add value to your life. And value is not money. I just thought I'd put it out there. Value is not money. We're talking about people who are able to say a positive word of encouragement to you, people who are able to give you helpful advice, people who are able to reassure you, and also people who are able to tell you when you're not doing it right, when you're not doing the right things. Positive people, keep those people in your circle and stay connected with those people. So those are some of the things that we can do as we attempt to deal with the stress that comes.
Yeah. A few points ago, you mentioned that we worry and because of the situation and so on, where are we going to get this and that from and so on. And that leads me now to ask you about anxiety. I personally am a worrier. I'm an overthinker. So even before doing this, there's a lot of things, in my mind, maybe like 10 to 15 things at any given moment that is just there floating around, situations, bad, good, So what would be your advice to people who have these sort of feelings, especially in this type of scenario, where everything has basically changed from what you are accustomed to, and now you're alone basically alone. Some people have no income. People are away from their friends, especially the extroverts. I don't know what is going through their mind.
They're out of their minds now. They're at their wits' end because they don't have their social circles, around them.
So this is an anxious situation, we say, and again, like with stress, we say, I'm anxious, I'm nervous, I am this and that. So I would like you to shed some light on what really is anxiety and how we deal with that also.
Anxiety is a kind of fear, but usually anxiety is based on a threat that you can't really put your finger on. It's more of an internal threat than an external. So there's nothing there to be afraid of necessarily, but there are things in your thoughts that are scaring you. So essentially, that is anxiety. Now, you can experience anxiety without having an anxiety disorder, which is a different thing. These are people who chronically worry about nothing in particular to the point where it affects their normal functioning. Then it becomes a disorder. All right, so all of us experience anxiety at some point or the other, and some of us more than others. Some of us are more worriers than others. So, so yes, that anxiety is a fear of, it's a kind of a generalized fear. We're not sure what we're afraid of. We're afraid of things that might happen or could happen or we heard happened or may not happen. And one of the things that our reality is that at least 80% of the things that we worry about, we don't need to.
Okay.
At least 80% of the things that we worry about are not real threats. If we could understand that, it would help us maybe be a little reassured and worry less. Then 10%, now these numbers will vary from person to person, but those are averages. 10% of those things are things that we can fix. So we've already eliminated that 80. It's never going to happen. We don't need to worry about it. And there's 10% of those things are things that we can fix, that we can control. And then there's the other 10% that we can do nothing about it. And if I can do nothing about it, why am I spending time worrying?
Exactly.
Now, I know that it's easier said than done, but I think that understanding those facts can be helpful.
Yeah. So it's a normal human condition to be anxious.
Yes, it's normal to be anxious. It helps us perform. It helps us perform.
Like good stress.
like good stress.
Okay.
You know, if I'm, let me give you a personal example. I experienced something that psychologists call performance anxiety, particularly when it has to do with dealing with audiences.
Okay.
Now, now that is strange because all of the work I do has to
Yes,
do,
is
you
facilitating
know,
and being in front of people.
I do training, I'm a lecturer, I have to speak to audiences all the time.
Yes.
But, you know, people don't believe me, I have a deathly fear of audiences.
Okay.
Now, what do I do in response to that fear? I prepare and I visualize all the possible situations and I try to put things in place. So if this happens, I will respond that way. The more prepared I feel, the less anxious I feel.
Okay.
So preparation helps us deal with anxiety.
Okay. So if you don't prepare, it becomes a problem.
Right. See, if I'm not prepared, I have to worry about my performance.
Exactly.
You know, if I don't research before I come on to a television interview, for example, I have to now worry about if what I'm saying makes sense. Whereas if I'm prepared,
You know.
I can flow a lot better. And then the more I flow, the less anxious I feel. So, you know, 5-10 minutes into my presentation, I forget that I was afraid in the first place.
You touched on earlier about a disorder, anxiety or panic disorder, and you're saying that you don't have to have a panic disorder to have anxiety. So how do you know that you need help, that you've reached this disorder stage?
Okay, great question. Now, first of all, let me differentiate between panic disorder and anxiety disorder. Now, anxiety is about the worry. And sometimes we are so worried that we can't do anything. It affects our normal functioning. Now, you said that you're a worrier, but I've worked with you and I know that you're very efficient. So it doesn't affect your normal functioning. It probably will raise your blood pressure.
Yeah.
So you don't have I don't think that you have a disorder.
Okay.
But if your panic gets to, if your anxiety gets to a point where you have all these things to do and you have, and you can't respond, you can't get out of bed in the morning, it is so bad. You're afraid to come out of your house, or whenever you stand in front of an audience, you freeze up, and this happens all the time. Then you need some help because it is affecting your ability to function normally. Panic disorder is a little more frightening, a little more physiological.
Okay.
When someone is experiencing a panic disorder, they feel a tightening of the chest. They feel it's difficult to breathe. They don't have a cold, they don't have asthma, but they feel like they're going to die because they can't breathe.
Okay.
You know, so panic disorders are frightening to look at because people looking on at that person think that something is happening to them. So if you have panic attacks, then you probably
Definitely.
need some professional help.
Yeah.
And if you have anxiety to the extent that it incapacitates you,
You need help.
that you can't do anything when you're so anxious you can't do anything, then it probably has crossed the line between a little situation and a disorder, particularly if this thing continues for an extended period of time. You have these issues 6 weeks, 2 months, 3 months, this thing is happening, then we know it's a disorder.
You mentioned a few things earlier in terms of how you can deal with anxiety. Preparation is one. Are there other avenues you can explore to help you cope with anxiety?
Reassuring yourself that it is not as bad as you think it is,
Okay.
in addition to the fact that you're preparing. Reassuring yourself that it's not as bad as you think it is. And then looking at the reality of the situation, ask yourself, what I'm afraid of, is this a reality? Is this something that I know for sure is going to happen? And if it's not, then I need to tell myself, well, I don't need to be afraid of it anymore. At the very, if it is more than you, then getting help. Reach out to a professional.
Okay.
Get professional help. And fortunately, in Ghana, we are moving to a place where that help is becoming more and more available. We have the mental health unit. We have psychologists and therapists around the country. You can find a lot of them advertised on Facebook, and they have pages and so on. Get professional help if it is beyond you.
Okay. I want to thank you very much, Mr. Campbell, for sharing it with us about stress and anxiety. And that's it for this session. We want to thank you for joining us. And just to remind you that for anxiety, you need to prepare and reassure yourself that it is not that bad. At least 80% of it, according to Mr. Campbell, is not that bad. So thank you once again for joining us, and we hope that you will join us for the next session. Thank you.